Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to Arts on Lafond's Friday lunch hour event. We welcome author Jamie Schumacher and some of her cohort from the West Bank to discuss and talk about some of the exciting stories in butterflies and tall bikes. So Jamie what was your title actually, Jamie, at the West Bank?
So I was the executive director of the West Bank Business Association.
Right, for several years, so almost a decade, right? And in the course of that time, I had the wonderful opportunity as an artist to participate in some projects on the West Bank, which were really a lot of fun, and that's how I met Jamie. So this is her second book, and I'm going to let her talk about the book a little bit, read from it, talk with some of the folks who've contributed to some of the stories in the book. So welcome, Jamie, and Bihi, and Tony. And so I'm going to disappear and I'll see you all a little bit later. Please pose any questions you may have for Jamie in the chat, and you can purchase her book. I'll put this up occasionally. You can purchase her book on her website, or if you Google it, you can find it online if there are other bookstores you prefer to purchase a book from. So welcome, Jamie, and I'll see you all.
Thanks, Mira. Hi, Tony. Hi, Bihi.
Hi, Jamie.
So thanks everybody for coming. Hope you've got your lunch and are feeling settled. I can't see anybody that's in the audience, which I hate. I love getting to see faces. So, but I'm really glad that I have some of my friends here to join me so I can at least see their faces. Thanks for coming. I was asked to do a little bit of a reading and then want to spend a lot of time just like chatting with my friends here, and any questions that you might have, we'll do our best to answer them. So Mira asked if I could read a little bit of the book first. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start with the chapter about Tony, and like what a better way to part of the book to read than with like the introductions from my friends. So this chapter is titled "A Goddamn National Treasure," which we actually switched. He's a goddamn national treasure. Tony's a Cardi. Palmer's Bar is quite possibly the perfect dive bar, with awards to prove it. A cornerstone institution of the West Bank, it's the entry point for many guests to the neighborhood. And for many regulars, Palmer's feels like home. Definitely feels that way for me. As you enter on the west side of Cedar Avenue, a painting of a dapper man in a suit and a top hat guides your way. Inside, you're immediately surrounded by a comfortable smell unique to dive bars with real history in them. Aged wood, the deep smell of sunlight baked into the walls, and classic grain belt tile, aged with whiskey, time, and the beat of countless souls. I've been to Palmer's countless times before taking my job at the West Bank Business Association, half the time for music, half for simply hanging out. There are few better places for camaraderie and communion in the spring than the bar's back patio. When I started my new gig, Lisa Hammer and Keith Berg were the owners and, as such, de facto hosts of the West Bank community. Both welcomed me warmly into the fold and supported me and the association throughout their tenure. Chatting with Keith on quiet mornings became one of the highlights of my regular outreach. When he passed away unexpectedly in 2015, I mourned the loss together with my Palmer's family. After a few years of running the bar solo, Lisa made the difficult decision, with wisdom and care, selling the institution to the right owner at the right time. Not willing to let just anyone come in and turn Palmer's into something it's not, she waited until the perfect person came along. Tony Zaccardi, to quote our friend Andy Holmes, is a goddamn national treasure. He is indeed something of a local legend, not unlike Palmer's itself. He's an accomplished musician in the acclaimed band Eleganza. Many of us got to know Tony on the other side of the bar, not on the West Bank, but at Grumpy's Northeast. I was lucky to know him that way, and I was absolutely thrilled when the news broke that he would be taking the dive into dive bar ownership. Tony's with us here today, and he's one of my favorite people. And Tony, welcome.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks for having me. It's pretty weird hearing that. Still, but, it's quite the role that I found myself in. That's for sure. Wow, this is a pretty crazy neighborhood, and there's so many pieces to it. And that's what's fun.
Well, thanks for joining. And thanks also for letting me interview you for the book. I was thinking it's been a little bit since the book came out, and one of the things that's been fun has been connecting with readers and then just hearing additional stories and like feedback, or like, oh, we should have written about this, or man, I got to tell you this crazy story. Is there anything, Tony, that you might say now that you've had a couple weeks and or just sharing from your time with Balmers that you want to add?
Oh, I haven't read the entire book yet. I'm honestly, I've been so darn busy, but it's been fun. I only have a few copies left, so people have been latching onto it because there's so little that's written, I think, about the West Bank, and so it's been fun hearing your perspective and people's take on your perspective, because there's so many parts of this neighborhood. There's so many people that are in here that I have no idea who they are, and so just that in this tiny little community, there's so much going on, in so many different areas and people and communities. And so it's been fun. It's very broad, and that's what's really fun perspective about this book. It's not just about the bars, it's just about KFAI, or just about, it's the broad community of it is a neat thing.
Jamie, what was your writing process like in the book? When did you first begin the book, and what was the trigger? What sort of got you thinking about this was going to be your next project? Oh, Jamie, I can't hear you somehow. Still can't hear you somehow. I wonder. Your mic is unmuted.
Is that better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So I think I had been hoping to do another book after my last book, and the West Bank is such a great neighborhood. It was kind of in the back of my mind, and things were like the seeds were being planted very early on. So when the pandemic started in March, when everything kind of shut down, I had started the process. I had actually done one in-person interview. I interviewed our friend Raina May. We met at the Corner Bar. She works with the Comedy Corner Underground. And so when March happened and everything started shutting down, I said, okay, well, either this book is going to be on pause for God knows how long, or, I've joked it was my pandemic anxiety project, but really I just, took that time and channeled, after the girls, I've got 2 young kids, after the girls were in bed, I would just sit down and write. And I did a lot of interviews during that time, either during nap times, or I think Tony's interview actually was like during nap time, but my youngest was not napping, so she kept interrupting us to say hi. But it was like, I think it was one of the things that saved me. And I know the same is a lot for like other artists and musicians, like the connections that we were able to forge, even if it was just like through screen with one another, and the opportunities to chat with one another was really, really helpful. So that I think was a really big catalyst last year, as well as just my own like personal life transitions. Now you are muted. We're going to be doing this mute juggle. I was talking when you started, actually, and I'm like, wait, why is she talking? I'm like, I'm in the middle of asking Tony questions. Like, oh, nobody can hear me.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So it seems like in some ways for writing or putting together a book project, that's a fairly short timeline. So how did that come together for you? Just the actual nuts and bolts of pulling it all together, and you had a really interesting artist to work with the visual. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that. How did that relationship come about, and what was that like working with someone to make drawings for your book?
Yeah. So it was, I think, happening during a really weird era. I really wanted, I didn't want to just get all the writing done and then work on illustrations. I wanted it to be more iterative and collaborative. So I actually worked with my niece, Corina, who's an emerging artist and an awesome comedian. but she's really, really creative. So we worked together through like different style ideas for what we wanted for the illustrations inside. And she worked on those as I wrote. So I would send her a chapter, she would send me some pictures, and we would just like, as I was writing, I had like all the little like concept sketches and her starting sketches taped around my computer. And it was just really helpful, little boost of energy and something to focus on other than just like doom scrolling on my phone during that time. So that and the interviews was really, really, really helpful.
So that collaborative process, how does that also align with your relationships in your 10 years or so of engaging with residents and business owners and artists on the West Bank? How does that sort of mirror that process, or how does that relate?
I think, and I'd love to hear from Tony on what you thought of this process too. If it was fun or if it was a pain in the ass. Also, I should have asked, can I swear on this show? Sorry. With the writing process too, with my last book, I had little clips from other artists that had shown in the gallery. The book was about Altered Aesthetics Gallery in the Northeast Arts community. This book, I wanted to be even more intentional and really, it's not just about my story. It's not just my voice, even though like as an author, it's kind of like innately centered in my experience because I'm writing it. I really wanted to be more intentional about other voices on the West Bank and making sure there was a mix of residents, other business owners, people who lived in the neighborhood before, people who live in the neighborhood now, and just tried to really be intentional about that process. And it wasn't similar. It wasn't like journalism where it's like, I'm going to get the one quote you have, but we really did like an iterative process where we interviewed. I tried to like condense it a little and make it a little bit easier for the reader to digest, and then send it back to folks. Like if there was something that they phrased awkwardly, or if they got a street name wrong or whatever, we could fix stuff like that. So it really was what they want, the best possible presentation of their voice, but still very colloquial and friendly. Tony, what did you think of that process? Was it fun? Was it too much going on for that?
I was unemployed for a better part of 9 months, so I had nothing else to do. No, I found it very easy from my perspective. Our initial video chat, and then just a handful of follow-up emails. Just, hey, what do you think of this? Hey, could you read this? Please, could you read this? Because I still couldn't get it all together, but just check it over, double check. The one story I had, like, okay, the fact for. That was a very simple process for me. And so from my angle, and I'm sure it was the same for many. I mean, boy, somebody's taking the time and space in their book to write about me and this bar, and least I could do is participate. And so I found it pretty fun and flattering.
How did for both of you, how did the process of connecting on sharing your stories in the book reflect your relationships over time in the West Bank? In your everyday, day-to-day, sort of year-to-year relationships?
I think for me, it felt pretty. I mean, it was just a continuous what I do and who I am down here. I mean, I'm on the West Bank 15 to 24 hours a day, every day, and so the flow of that was fine. And I like telling stories. I hear a lot of things and stories, just day to day, stuff you see down here and whatever. And so I'm sure Beaky's got a million stories too, of just things we see down here. And so me passing on one kind of funny story that I remembered over time that always makes people laugh when they tell it. It's a pretty easy thing, and this is a perfect continuance of my day, of any day of mine, just to work with Jamie on this and just keep on going, doing the next thing, So.
Mary, you're muted, and I wondered if Behe's still with us. Uncle, are you there?
Yes, I am. How are you?
Okay, great.
Maybe we could direct this next question to both Behe and Tony, which is there reading through Jamie's stories that were shared and also the stories that you shared, is there a story that really touches you about your relationship with the West Bank, people that you've encountered that would be interesting to share with our audience today? You want to start with Behe?
Yes. Actually, there's there are a lot of stories in the book. I live in the neighborhood and I worked in the neighborhood with Jamie and many others for over 22 years. And it's really very interesting neighborhood. And the way Jamie captured all the stories that you see every day that happen around you in just one book, it's really amazing. One of the stories really that touched me is the oh, let me. Okay, I'm at K5 radio, so a lot of things happen. Um,
Yeah,
uh,
your sound
yeah.
is fine. So don't
Okay.
worry about it. Your sound is
Yes. So one of the interesting stories that a lot of people miss about West Bank or Cedar-Riverside um, is the diversity and the cohesion of this community. Jamie talks about in the book about people who live here or come here or visit and who they are, hippies, um, Democrats, libertarians, Green Party, Muslims, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, everyone, and they all live, everybody lives here, and everybody has a strong opinion about politics, about social issues, about things that are happening around us, and still those people who have strong opinions, different opinions, seem to coexist and live together in harmony. And also, one of the things I post on my social media bragging about the neighborhood or the community is Palmer's and the mosque. I pray in that mosque, and our Palmer's bar is a really a big attraction that brings people from other communities to our community and break that barrier of negativity. A lot of people call this neighborhood crack stacks, all kind of negative names. So Jamie emphasized those ambassadors, whether it's a business, whether it's personalities, whether it's an institution, that really bring other neighbors to our community and show the greatness of our community. Yes, I always say we have the only bar and a mosque next to each other in the whole state, not if not in the whole country, that
Or the
go
world.
along. A couple of days ago, as the summer rolls in, the outdoor music at Balmer starts. So a couple of days ago, there was a country music band that was really blowing from the Balmers into the Cedar and Riverside and all over the neighborhood. And it didn't bother anyone, but everyone enjoyed it. And then you have the prayer time comes. And then you walk by the band and the people having fun, and you go to the mosque and you pray. And sometimes past and present relations between the bar and the mosque is, if sometimes there's an event at the mosque, they will go across our next door and talk to the bar and say, oh, we're having this event. And if sometimes the bar has events that's not normal events, they would just communicate. Another thing Jamie really touched is when we had disaster, as we had a couple of them in 2014, I believe, January, New Year, there was a fire in the apartment next to the old apartment next to the Palmers, and when people were jumping out of the fire buildings, it was the Palmers bar that really collected the material and assisted and helped and opened up the bar for the victims till they get help. Those are the stories that are not told. How Cedar Cultural Center fundraising by bringing all these musicians around the world to help the victims. How the Brian Cole was open. How Cedar Culture, People Center Clinic collected over 100,000. The stories that really bind this community. If you want to see West Bank, you gotta have disaster, unfortunately. Those are the stories that really people don't tell and don't know. There are thousands that pass by Palmer's Bar and the mosque and on Cedar Avenue, just get to work or get to home, but never stop. and don't know much about this neighborhood. So this book really is an ambassador, a way bigger ambassador than Balmer's or other personalities, that really takes all those stories to tell not only in Minnesota, but to the world. So I'm very, very glad about that. The other thing the book touches also is the history of this neighborhood. You know, a lot of people, unfortunately, don't have positive perception of our communities here. So the book also gives them an opportunity to know what these people are, what these buildings stand for, where they come from, who are they, how do they get along together. We just don't see them crossing the streets. How do they get along with each other? Are they afraid of each other? Are they? So it really deciphers a lot of codes that sometimes are not favorable to the residents of the West Bank, but also how historic it is, how Minneapolis and the world and Minnesotans should be proud of it. So it's very interesting book. I keep reading again and again, and I really had the opportunity to talk to Jamie on the radio last Tuesday for a couple of minutes, and we are hoping to talk more about this.
He basically said that, brought up the two things I was going to bring up, was just kind of where else in the world does a bar and a mosque share a wall, and kind of the relationship that I'm trying to foster with them. But also, after that disaster next to the mosque, Representative Omar, she was here doing a campaign speech with Bernie Sanders, brought up that actual incident that I talked about how Palmer's, I wasn't here at the time, but the folks at Palmer's brought blankets, brought people in, and cooked pizzas, and just helped, 7 in the morning, just to do anything to kind of work with our community. And that is one thing I think people don't realize. It's like, we're all very different. I've met BPD just a couple times in person, briefly, but we all love this neighborhood for what we take out of it, what we want. It's nice to see when people step into different things. I was walking through the mall across the street the other day, going, oh, I didn't realize this was here. All that kind of, it's pretty rewarding. And Jamie, I think it's been great about bringing different groups together in our community. For sure.
Let's see. What do I want to ask you here, Jamie? So I've heard that there are some stories that there are some haunted buildings in the West Bank area. I think a lot of other folks who may not be aware of that. So anybody want to join in? Jamie, you want to lead us off? But maybe Bihi and Tony, maybe you've heard of some of these haunted spaces, or maybe there's even a particular story or experience of someone that you know that didn't maybe end up in Jamie's book that might be interesting for our audience.
I've heard nothing. I've heard that my building is haunted. I've heard of things picking up and flying themselves across my basement, but that's in years past. I've been in this building at all hours of the day and night by myself hundreds of times, and I've never felt that personally. I've heard about mixed blood. Jamie might be able to speak to that better.
Yeah, there's definitely a history there, and I think what's been interesting, and so I officed out of Mixed Blood, I officed out of the Southern, I officed out of the KFAI building, like in my time with the Business Association, and the Southern in particular, what was really interesting about the Southern was stuff would happen. We'd have late shows, or we'd have late events, or I'd be there really early in the morning before an event. And nobody else is in the building, we're unlocking everything, and you'd hear stuff. And, sometimes it's close to a hotel, but it's set out enough apart, and there's these big center walls. So it was pretty easy to tell what noises were coming from where. But the building itself, what I thought was really interesting is when we'd hear certain things late at night, not really know what they were, and just kind of, take that away. But then I heard stories from other artists and technicians in the theater community who, unsolicited, they would just tell me their story, and they were hearing the same things. I was there with a girlfriend. We heard a little child laughing at 2:00 in the morning. And, this isn't anybody from town hall. Obviously, this is not, but like the very distinct sound of children laughing late at night. And other theater artists heard that too. And I'm hearing the stories of like, oh, other people had this weird experience, and that it was the same as us. Is like, okay, well, what's there? What's that like unexplained thing? And you know, whether or not you believe in ghosts, like what's happening with that? What is like that connection to the history of the space? Vihi, what about you? Have you heard stories? Have other residents told you stories? You're muted, by the way. Muted. Uncle, you're muted.
Oh, sorry about that.
There we go.
Yeah, I hear a lot of stories from residents for a long time. I'll start with my own apartment. And my wife and my two daughters used to complain about hearing or seeing something move in the apartment. And I actually am hard-headed. I don't believe those things. So it went on and on. And at one point, we had to call Imam. My wife really called Imam to read some verses to get these noises out or things. I keep complaining, I keep denying that this exists. I just like, it's your mind, it's the TV, it's the cat. Then my wife and my kids went back. My wife is Somali Kenyan, so they went back to meet for the first time, to go to Africa and meet relatives and grandma and grandpa. And so I had the opportunity to stay there by myself. And the things like any other family we always fight over is, where's my charger? You took my charger. No, this is orange. This is not yours. We're always fighting over things, or missing keys or misplacing them. So my family blames them on the people who live with us. And I blame them. So I had the opportunity to live by myself while they were gone. Then suddenly the same thing was happening. I would place the keys on the desk over there. Then suddenly, after 25 minutes, I would find them in the bathroom. Then I started really befriending them and saying, hey, listen, I really have a meeting. I'm late. Can I get my keys? So it's funny, really, to find yourself talking to yourself while you're denying all these years. Yes, I've seen other residents that also talk about other people living there, or hearing noises sometimes, or sometimes getting their door banged, and they think it's kids playing, and they suddenly open and nobody's there. It's like 2 a.m, but it's not that many. So I think West Bank has been the vocal point of immigration in our state, the melting pot of Minnesota or Midwest. In this neighborhood, as you all know, was the neighborhood of immigrants from Norway or Scandinavian countries. There were Swedish communities that were a minority in this neighborhood back 50s or 40s, who owned the pharmacy and everywhere. So the whole world went through. So I think a lot of great people are still living with us. I don't know how we can learn from those movements and sounds and talk to them, but I think we have more population here than we think.
So for any of you, the University of Minnesota West Bank has quite a large footprint over in the West Bank, and I'm curious and interested in how over time the relationship between university students and faculty, and just maybe even if they don't live in the neighborhood, how that kind of youthful influx that kind of changes, and people come in for 3-4 years and then they move out. How has that affected relationships in the West Bank?
If I go first, as an advocate, an activist, one of the things that is really part of your program is blaming other institutions and people for things you want to be done. But I want to highlight really the amazing relationship built by, the relationships between institutions and the community. it's not built by the community or by the institutions, but by people who really have a heart in it. And it's hard to find those people, but we have enough people in West Bank. So people like Mary Benzuri from the Chance program from the University of Minnesota in West Bank. People like who retired, a great person, Mary Lotru, amazing. I've worked with them for over 15 years. Even when they worked together at the Augsburg together, they built this relationship with the Augsburg University now, and UFM and the community. And one of the ways they did is not only doing studies or meetings, but actually making sure, like Augsburg or the Chinese program, by asking people like me or Jamie or KJ or anyone that's around to give them a tour of the neighborhood with their new faculty or their new students. Come see the mosque, come see Brian Coyle, come through the high rises, explain to the students the history, who are these people, why are they here, where they come from, what are their inspirations. And suddenly people learn that people who live here are just like their families they come from. They are after American dream. They might look funny with hijabs, but or speak funny English, but or gesture a lot and loud, but they're just like their families. So I believe it depends on the personality that represents the neighborhood and or the institution. And we had great people that built a strong relationship between University of Minnesota and Augsburg University. Mary is gone, and I'm so sorry that I missed her party. I think it was Zoom, but right now we have Cock, Steve Peacock from the Augsburg that took over the program and leading the leadership program, the forum of the community. So I believe the relationships we had over the years has been very strong. For example, sometimes incidents happen, young people do something at the camps, or the police from the U came over. Um, if there's a complaint, then the chief of the university police would suddenly come to Brian Coyle and talk to the community and smooth things over. And we work together on safety. We work together on cultural exchange. We work together on studies, and sometimes financial support that comes from them to the institutions that serve the community, like BUC of Brian Coyle, if they do a youth program. The other thing is Augsburg University has been doing the kitchen over there. The students have been cooking nutritious food for summer programs, youth at the Brian Coyle. They would support the Trinity Church that has last 20 something years doing homework help for young kids. A lot of people don't know. So I think we had and have continue to have an important relationship that people know each other and work together. And I'm very thankful of those personalities that really took an aim on the importance of cohesion in the West Bank.
Tony, do you have anything to add?
You got to get unmuted, Tony.
I think Behe said it a lot better than I could, because he knows. I've only been down here for just over 3 years, and so as far as the institutional relationships go, my perspective is I don't have much of, but I don't see a lot of like the students. I have some faculty that hang out here, and I've done some lecture series where there's a criminal psychology professor at the U that's done some kind of TED Talks down here, over a cocktail, tell stories, and and I love that kind of stuff because it's a great way for people to learn, and actually thinking it'd be really fun to work with like Behe, for example, have him here, go, what do you want to know about this neighborhood, and have some coffee and chat about stuff that our customers can learn. That's what's more important to me currently than working better with the community, everyone understanding each other. Then they said I just don't have much of a institutional knowledge, I guess.
I would love to
Something
add.
that I would.
Sorry.
You go ahead.
I would love to add also the other important thing that Jamie mentioned in the book is the faith community. Um, a lot of people think it's a Muslim community, it's extremist community. It's a people who have secrets. And when I'm leading a tour and take people to the mosque, usually almost 99% I don't announce I'm bringing guests. So we just walk in the middle of prayer and then ask the imam to come over and explain what Islam is. And I encourage students or the tour participants, no matter who they are, to ask tough questions so they can learn really. Jamie mentioned how the faith community here work together. Our former Pastor Jane of the Trinity, and Darul Hijra Mosque has built this relationship at the common table at the Trinity Church and the mosque to bring people together, communities together, worshippers together. One of the most beautiful things that I have pictures of attended is when every time there are attacks on the community or on the faith, or there's a fear, or there's a threat, someone says, I'm going to come down and kill all these Muslims. Everybody jumps together. And the Trinity Church and Pastor Chain and Oxford College are the leading forces that bring people together outside the mosque. And I remember this event they would do every Friday in the winter outside the mosque when the congregation comes out and you have all these Christians lining up on the tables that's offering you sambusas and hot Somali tea, telling you we love you, we are with you. You know, that's amazing things that happen here. So the faith community that Jamie mentioned it in the book, it's really one of the core things that really hold this community together or glue this community together. How they support each other, how they work together each other, how they um, are helping each other learn from each other. And one of the things that a lot of Christian community or other faiths don't know about Islam is that how Islam thinks of Jesus.
You muted yourself just then.
Yeah, I'm here. So Jesus actually is mentioned more in the Quran than Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad. So Jesus also is considered like Adam and Yaqub and Muhammad as a prophet. So there's a huge chapter on Mary. So a lot of people when they came interfaith, really they loved the similarities in their faiths as a community, not only as a people who are Americans and chasing their American dream, but even that faith that people think is a Muslim community. It's not actually a Muslim community. It's a West Bank community. And faith community that was mentioned answers a lot of questions that people had wanted answers for about the faith in this community.
Jamie, did you want to add something?
Oh, it was just a note on when we were talking about the relationship with the institutions and the universities. And I just wanted to recognize the amazing students that we got to work with. And, you know, we had great faculty that like created those ongoing connections. But the students themselves were also, you know, they would maybe come with some preconceived notions about the West Bank or knowing nothing about the West Bank because they were transplants or coming in from a different area. And maybe a little hesitant to get to know a new neighborhood. But after working with us, you know, Mary and Mary, they both lead, Mary Laurel from Augsburg and Mary from the University of Minnesota. They would do neighborhood tours and get folks familiar. They would introduce folks to restaurants. And then we worked with the Leadership Minor program and the Chance program to work with projects with students so that they were getting hands-on experience in whatever career path, be it marketing or communications or urban design, things like that. And we would try to connect them to businesses, connect them to the neighborhood. And through these projects and through their experience getting to know the neighborhood, I saw students after students just like falling in love with the West Bank. And then that became their place. They weren't hanging out from that point on. They weren't hanging out at Dinkytown and Stadium Village. They were coming to the West Bank. They were studying at Hard Times. And it was just really great to watch like minds and hearts open up, and just them finding new foods that they love, new places to go, new shows to check out. And it was great working with the youth for so many reasons, but especially during like those early formative college years.
That's great. I wonder, Jamie, if you could lead us off, and then Bihi and Tony, if you could also, from your perspective, answer this next question, which is with reading, what for other neighborhoods who would like to learn from the West Bank's experience, a very positive experience, it sounds like, of community development and community intersection. How would the interviews in Jamie's book lend a perspective to other neighborhoods or other neighborhood leaders around, especially around the Twin Cities metro, well, around the world, but I'm thinking local here to start, to learn how we can nurture and help our communities thrive. Look for businesses. How can businesses connect with some of the religious institutions? How can the religious institutions feel more comfortable making connections and reaching out? So basically, how would this process of looking at the people speaking in the interviews in Jamie's book help model for some of the rest of us how we might do something similar in our own neighborhood? So let's start off with Jamie.
Yeah, there's a lot in there to unpack, so I'll do my best. First off is I wanted to say that I do think it's really important that we interview and capture stories and collect stories, especially in ways that feel ethical. Like I mentioned, I did an iterative process with my interviewees. Everybody got to read through and verify that they were being presented the way they wanted to be presented. I think that's really, really important in being responsible writer for things like this. So I would just say that it's really important to capture these stories and to get them into print and to save them, because they're important part of historical preservation, and not just because we know the textbooks are going to do what the textbooks are going to do. It's important to have people holding their own narratives, and that it doesn't have to be just me or people like me. Anybody from a neighborhood can help with doing things like that and help with these parts of neighborhood and historical preservation, especially storytelling. I certainly went through a process of who am I to write this book? But it's sharing my own experience. And then with doing that, I felt like now was an especially important time to be celebrating the neighborhood and everything that, the businesses in the neighborhood, the people in the neighborhood, and that blend of musical and immigrant history is really important. So with that, I would say the other thing for neighborhoods looking at this, we just have to look across the river at Stadium Village and see that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Stadium Village's composition was not terribly unlike the West Bank in that it was mostly locally owned small businesses. And now there's less than 5 locally owned businesses in Stadium Village. And that's because there's just been this heavy influx of development and money and just kind of putting things over. With the West Bank, I don't think it's immune to that. I think that the reason the West Bank has stayed fiercely independent and local has taken a lot of fighting to keep it that way and make sure the community retains ownership. And it's taken a lot of investment from the property owners there that are dedicated in seeing those spaces remain local, independent, and not just a line of chains. I think that in order, especially as the city and downtown continues to encroach, it's going to take additional, I don't know if you'd call it resistance, but maybe a little of resistance, and also investment, so that way we're making sure the historic theater's walls don't crumble and that their bathrooms get upgraded. And it's going to take this combination of persistence and resistance and investment to make sure the West Bank is able to stay fiercely local and independent. I think that's really important in a cultural district, but just the neighborhood for perpetuity. Tony, anything you'd add to that?
I think one thing that's important about this neighborhood, and I think that people could learn from. I worked in Northeast Minneapolis for 20 years, and I lived in Frogtown for a long time. Frogtown was a challenging neighborhood at times. West Bank is a challenging neighborhood too, but I think there's a lot of among my friends and community that I know down here. There's a class saying, "You don't know what you got till it's gone." Well, we do. We know what we've got. because there's nothing like this left in the Twin Cities at all, and it's again, it's the us working with our neighbors next door when we can. Um, we all, again, I said earlier, we all kind of we all make it our own. It's West Bank is different for everybody, but it's getting to know your faith leaders, getting to know, the women that run the coffee shop, getting to know the new business owners down the street, learn, not being scared to walk into a business that you don't understand. Like, what's in that mall? We'll walk in the mall and see. Oh, it's people that repair, they repair cell phones, or they sell, hijabs, and they sell rugs, and they sell accessories. It's being in your community, being involved in your community, going into places you don't know, just to see what it's actually about, and then you go, oh, this is, and it's more of that. I think that's what Jamie did a good job of bringing that to us, because I'm pretty lazy sometimes. But getting to know that neighborhood better, getting to know, if it's Hamlin Midway, if it's Frogtown, if it's, East Phillip, whatever, not being afraid to venture out and get to, door to door, walk into the hardware store.
I think that's a good point, Tony, in the sense that with car culture, that it's very easy for a lot of us to just hop in and just drive somewhere. And I know the times when I've decided to walk a mile to the post office, and I noticed the graffiti a lot more, and in little places on, little tiny things, and with it's open. When you walk, you're walking at a slower pace, and you're more likely to sort of even wave to a business as you go by or something. So, or go in and just sort of a friendly, hi, because when we drive, we're going to a destination probably, and we're not going to be just kind of popping in as we go along. So I think that's a great notion, is where can you walk to in your neighborhood and just get to know an enlarged circumference. So
That's right. Yeah.
How about Vicky?
A lot. I think there are a lot of great things that other neighborhoods can learn from James' book, Butterflies and Tall Bikes. Diversity, encouraging diversity in the neighborhood and in the communities is really vital, as we are going to become a very diverse state, very diverse country. It's really it's imperative not to resist, but to welcome that and encourage that. A lot of people don't know their neighborhood or their neighbors, their neighborhood businesses, and sometimes they might have a negative perception of that, and work with those who wants to change that and bring bigger businesses and corporations, and then that leads to gentrification of a neighborhood. So businesses are the base of those things that hold community together and resist against gentrification and turmoil. So the things that we can learn from this book, that other neighborhoods can really mirror on, is to the importance of neighbors knowing each other. That's also very important in terms of addressing the crisis in public safety right now. When you don't antagonize your neighbor because simply they look different, or they believe different, or they walk different, but embrace their differences and talk to them, you'll definitely find an ally and a neighbor. So I think the cohesion of this neighborhood, and also with the amazing diversity in everything in this neighborhood, it's something that really needs to happen in other neighbors. For example, there's a friend of mine, Claudia Kitak, from Mills District. We met years ago, and I actually interviewed her on the radio several times. Her goal was to deny and ignore the bridge that divide West Bank and Mill District, or Cedar-Riverside, by creating relationships, by working together, by inviting us and working with our youth, led by Coach Weber, amazing woman, in terms of basketball, arts, music, and leading to performing at the Walker Arts Theater, or the other theater in the Mill District, huge theater. That's That's unbelievable. I mean, getting young people into arts at that big level and resources and helping their. So it's important really to read this book and see how a community that's slightly different from most of the communities in Minneapolis, and to see, to learn what works the best. What is it that makes this community go around and function and become successful in terms of relationships and coexisting peacefully? I remember when the uprising after the murder of George Floyd by Minneapolis police officers. There was a turmoil in the city, so uprising, riots, and we were afraid here in the community. And I remember young people getting together and telling us they wanted to keep the patrolling the neighborhood. Then suddenly we met people from KFI radio, from other businesses, the whole neighborhood. Some of them on top of buildings. A woman coming up 3 in the morning with tea and food for the young people. In other neighborhoods, their only youth were actually part of the problem, or burning their own businesses. So it was an amazing story to see young Black Muslim who feel disenfranchised, who feel who are the lower ladder of the economic prosperity in this community, in this state and city, who really felt, instead of getting their anger at their, like many other youths, who felt that they should take the lead to protect their businesses, their diverse businesses, and take the risk to stay up till the morning every night. That is the product of the relationships between the community, the businesses, and the faith communities. And I think if you want to know more, you should read this book and see if it can do in your neighborhood, and it's doable. And that will, I believe, make all our communities and neighborhoods, from uptown to Longfellow to Border Home to North Minneapolis, a safer community. And I think it's a revolution that needs to get out there. And I thank Jamie for really sharing this, because all those 22 years, I mean, every time we try to share this story, it's like, where do you start? So Jamie had the audacity to really sit down and piece all these stories together and talk to everyone. And I think that's really amazing.
Thank you, Bihi. Tony, can you hold up the book again? I left my copy at home, so I'm sure Jamie probably has one too. So Butterflies and Tall Bikes is available on Jamie's website, or you can probably just Google it and find it online. Jamie, I did have a question in the chat. Someone wondered, who did the great cover? Who's your artist for your cover?
Thank you for asking. I talked about the illustrations with my niece, Corina, but I didn't get a chance to talk about Kevin. So Kevin Cannon, who's a really dear friend of mine, we met and started working together when I was running Altered Aesthetics Gallery in Northeast. But he's an incredible artist and a cartographer. So Kevin Cannon, he did the West Bank area directory map and our logo and signage, as well as like a bunch of other neighborhood maps. So when I was thinking about the cover for the story, like who could do this kind of weird design that I had in mind, and ask Kevin, because he's got such a great understand. Can you see like the detail? It's like the neighborhood on a record player, and the song coming out of the neighborhood and different features from the neighborhood. So Kevin did the incredible cover, and I had some test readers read the book and like look things over, and they thought a map would be really helpful. So Tony's got the map up right now, and you can buy copies of this map on Kevin Cannon's website. It's kevincannon.org, I believe, kevincannon.org. But he put together a map of the neighborhood for the book. There's a little bit more color in the print version, but the book one is black and white. And it's so detailed, you probably can't even barely see in the picture. But there's little Easter eggs too, and little nuggets of happiness from the stories. kevincannon.org, sorry, I should say org. And little nuggets from the stories and surprises. Like even every time I look at it, I find something new. But the detail is incredible. Sorry, it's really hard to hold the book up and not like smash it in your face. But yeah, Kevin Cannon.
Are there any other folks you'd like to give a shout out to who helped with some feedback and maybe editing, or just, I would say great support throughout the pandemic that helped you make it to the finish line?
Probably more than we have time to mention in the past 5 minutes. Just so many. I really do think it was a collaborative project. Thank you so many people who gave me time for interviews and had great conversation. In addition to being, great to include in the book, it was just it was a lifeline last year to be able to connect with my friends and have dinner together and talk about the West Bank and share stories. So everybody that helped with the book, my editor Madeline she's amazing. She's incredible. So she helped from start to finish with getting things ready to go. The artists that I worked with, and then all the readers who tested it, and then everybody who's reading and the book now. I'm online probably way too much, so I'm really easily accessible on Twitter and Facebook, and I'm on Insta also. But if you read it and there's like a story that you want to share or something that resonated with you, please let me know. I love hearing back from readers. Or if there's things that you didn't like and it's like, oh, you should have written about this. I guess that was the question that I had for Vihi and Tony is what should be in book 2? If we do with the West Bank, the next book on the West Bank, what should we add?
Here's one other question, or one other maybe a prompt. Perhaps there's an opportunity for a West Bank. Maybe there already is, and you can inform me. A podcast or something where maybe even led by young people, where they're interviewing people every week. There's a new interview with someone. Maybe there's a room for a podcast about the West Bank, all the things that all of you are doing, and perhaps Jamie, even you could read your book, and your book could be out in audio form as well. Maybe perhaps even with some of the audio of the interviews. At any rate, last thoughts from everyone here as we wrap up. How about Tony? A last thought, Tony?
Well, I think it's an honor. Obviously, not lone spoke, but it's an honor to be part of this and be part of this community, and it's exciting because like I said, I haven't read the entire book yet, so I still have a lot to learn. But it's also nice just to have some recognition for what everyone's doing down here, and acknowledge that people are in all different communities are really working to make this place home and livable and safe and fun. And Jamie is a big part of that. Brought a lot of people together as her role at the West Bank Business Association, and now as an author. My thoughts are thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Vihi, do you have some parting thoughts here?
Yes. I'm really glad that what usually happens in this community is someone else who is not from here telling your story, who doesn't know much about you. Sometimes what we have seen is it's a very interesting neighborhood. So sometimes people from other countries tell us our story, or other states or other neighborhoods. So I'm very glad that one of us is telling this story. And so I feel like we're all telling our stories, every one of us. It's like a big platform to have Jamie tell our story, take our voices. And I think there are a lot of stories in there. There are so much history, rich history of the West Bank there. It goes back to a long time. And also it talks about even its geography. We are part of downtown. We are part of the Mississippi River. We are part of the University of Minnesota. We're part of Oxford College. Very interesting way of telling our story geographically, emotionally, in every aspect you look at it. I think it's a great model. We're not a perfect community. We have the challenges that everybody deals with, but the way we deal with it, the way we actually deal with challenges that many other neighbors don't face, the way easily we deal with it, not easy, but the way we find solutions, the way we work together, the way we yell at each other and finger point it, but at the end of the day, we fix together. We clean our neighborhood together. Actually, I want to say proudly that KFAI won the trash can award. Remember, Jamie? Jamie
I do remember, yeah.
Actual trash can as the reward, and for any institution that picks up the biggest trash of that day. So it is a neighborhood that has its own ways of coming up, very creative, of cleaning up, working together, having fun together, addressing challenges together, and coming together when we need each other. I think it's a great story. I think it's a reflection of a community that's completely misunderstood. And I think you will find this as a model for your community, for your neighborhood, for your state, for your country. So I think it's a great story with a great storyteller.
Thank you, Bihi. Jamie, parting thoughts?
Just again, a thank you and appreciation to everybody that was involved. Thanks for having us, and thanks for letting me invite friends to talk as well. It's especially as things like begin to open up. I do put a call in the book. If you love the West Bank, if you love these businesses, get out there and support these businesses. Go to Palmer's, go to Kiefer Court, go have lunch, and these businesses will be around if we continue to support them and support this community.
Great. Thanks you so much, Jamie, and thanks for sharing your book with Arts on Lafond. And I want to encourage everyone who's listening today, if you haven't read the book yet, reach out to us. We'll make sure we post it. This video will end on, so you can share the link with someone else who might like to eavesdrop in on the conversation, even if you're not able to join us today. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jamie, and wishing you the best of luck with getting the book out. We'll try to tell as many people as we can. Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Bihi, for joining us. And
thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.